What I'd like to be able to do is talk a little bit about the picture behind me called Shared Leadership Disciplines, book that I wrote with a colleague of mine. You can't see it because of the setting here, but you'll see a picture of it coming out later. What are the 5 disciplines and how do they come together? To do that, I'd like to share a quick story on where the 2 words actually came from. And they're not new words. They've been around for a long time. A woman named Mary Parker Follett back in the 1800s and early 1900s was talking about modern management, and she happened to use the word shared leadership a few times. So we look back at her as maybe one of the inspirations for what we have rediscovered and what we are promoting is a brand of leadership that allows everybody on the leadership team to have a voice, whether they're introvert or extrovert, whether they're male or female, whether they're old or young, whether they're of color or not, and what color, what shade. Looking at the diversity that we have in our teams and saying, how can we, as a very diverse team with different interests, different learning styles, become a strong team so that we can create a shared leadership culture that is, thank God it's today, not thank God it's Friday. By saying thank God it's Friday is our leadership culture in our company, is really saying the only day that really matters is the day we get away from each other. And all too often we have environments where it's great to get away from whoever your boss is, whoever your colleagues are, because you have conflicts, you have stress that you haven't been able to work through. You haven't been able to see the best side of them. You haven't been able to connect, to really reach out and say, who are you anyway? Let's have lunch. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other. As a consequence, we want to change that. We have seen it change. And what we'd like to do in this last part of our conversation with you is to help you understand what are those 5 disciplines and how can we use those 5 disciplines? Where have we used them? What are some of the tools that bring those disciplines to life so that we can create a culture of thank God it's today. Thank God it's Thursday. On Friday, thank God it's Friday. Thank God it's today. So today represents every day of the week. And we're waking up in the morning saying, who am I going to be with? What can I learn? What are the questions I have? How can I ensure that everybody's voice in that conversation, mine and hers, gets heard? And if not, we'll ask for it. We said, I need some help. I've been in many meetings where somebody said, let's start talking about this particular topic. And I said, hold on a minute. I need some help. I'm an introvert. I need at least a minute to get my thoughts together, and then I can talk. I don't have any trouble talking, but I want to be clear on what I'm talking about, who I'm talking about, and what and why and how and so what. So format really helps me get my thoughts together. I was with a colleague in Romania, and we were on our way to a meeting, and I said, Dan, where are we going? And he said, oh, we're going to a business meeting. It's a #1 organization in Bucharest. And I said, okay, and what's on the agenda? He said, you. I said, thanks for telling me. When are we getting there? He said, in 10 minutes. I said, what am I supposed to be talking about? And he said, you're talking about leadership, of course. So as soon as I got there, I excused myself and I went to the men's room, sat down on the toilet, took out a piece of paper and put the quadrant. Why, what, how, so what? Within 3 minutes, I was able to walk out of the men's room, go to the podium, sit with the others who were at the lead table. And when it came my turn, I was able to talk because I had a clear understanding of who's in the room, why they were there, and what was expected of me. And then it was just a matter of organizing my thoughts and then ending with the so what, the application implication steps. So what I'm telling you today, and what Ruby and I will be working with you, is basically focusing on shared leadership disciplines. What are they? And if you'll notice at the basement, the foundation here, we have action, reflection, learning principles. We're going to also introduce those to you briefly. Obviously, what we have here is a course. of things that we were doing in our team coach certification program, so that people who really want to work with teams as either team coaches or team leaders, be a leader coach, have this knowledge, this competence so that they can use it. So what I'd like to do is, before Ruby puts on the screen the 5 disciplines, tell you where it came from in terms of LIM. So I'm going to take you back to January 11th, 2011. I was in Hong Kong, and I got a telephone call from Robin White, the head of HR for the region. And he said, Ernie, I have a special request from Grace, who would like to have you as your coach. Are you interested? And I said, I know Grace. She's in Hong Kong. I'm in Hong Kong. I would love to. Yes. So I said, thanks. I'll put you in touch with Grace. I got a note from her within 10 minutes and said, Ernie, I understand you're in Hong Kong. I want some help. She said the magic word. I said, Grace, let's have dinner. So over dinner, she told me that she had a bit of a challenge in the Hong Kong team. She was the team leader. The team was dispersing. They were intimidated. They were actually leaving the company. And you can imagine, when you have a turnover like that, you get engagement scores going down, you get performance scores going down, and then you get profitability following very quickly. And so she was faced with that threesome: engagement, performance, profitability. And I said, you want to stay? And she said, yes, I do. But I don't know what to do. And so, without even thinking, I said, would you be interested in considering shared leadership? And she said, what is that? And I said, I'm not going to tell you. I want you to figure it out. Let's have breakfast tomorrow and tell me what you've come up with, and then we'll have a conversation around shared leadership. We did. She had 2 pages, not surprising to me, on what she thought shared leadership was. At the end of that conversation, she said, Ernie, could you help me bring shared leadership to life with my team? And I said, I'd be delighted. That began the journey for LIM in the shared leadership arena. And so what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about what we've learned. In the case of Grace, and by the way, she has been public with this information. I met her last year at the book launch in Hong Kong, and she told her story, with the story I'm telling you now, about how shared leadership got started in Hong Kong with her and then quickly spread throughout the region and around the world. And what happened within 3 months is, if you were to walk into Grace's team, you wouldn't know who the team leader was. If you had walked into her meeting before, you would, of course, know. She was sitting around a boardroom table. She was sitting in the same seat every time. She was running every meeting. She was running every agenda item. She was on time. People were showing up late. She would give them the evil eye until people got tired of the evil eye and they left the company. So what happened is that you would walk in, you wouldn't see who was the team leader, because everybody was engaged. They had a meeting, they had an agenda, they had a purpose, and different ones of them were taking it. They were sharing the facilitation week after week. As a consequence, engagement went up, performance went up, profitability went sky high. She got a promotion. She took not only Hong Kong, but she also had Taiwan. And she said, could you help me there? Helped her in Taiwan. Her team was ready to go and running very smoothly, with her or without her in Hong Kong. The same happened in Taiwan very quickly. So she was able to be the official leader and share the leadership with her team. Here are the disciplines that I'd like to walk you through, tell you a story about each one of them, and a tool. So Ruby, if you could help me here. The first one is connect. And the story I would like to tell you is with an organization that was working and still is working across the region with pharma companies. They're a research company, and they have been looking at research that most pharma companies need to know and doing it with them. And I got invited by the team leader to work with her and her team. And our first meeting was in Korea, South Korea, Jeju Island. Had no idea where it was. When I got there, it's a miraculous place. It's beautiful. And we were in a 5-star, maybe a 6-star hotel if they exist. It was unbelievable. And somebody said, why did we come all this way to Jeju Island to sit in a hotel the whole time? And I said, good question. Let's get out of here. So we decided to do something, and we went for a walk. And it was a different walk than most people have taken, because every 10 minutes we blew a whistle, we had a little map, and we ended up walking for 10 minutes with every member of the team. So by the end of the walk, a 2-hour walk, we had a conversation of 10 minutes with every other member of the team. We call it a walk and talk. We've accommodated for people who can't walk that long and have sit and talk or stand and talk. Or we've reduced it to coffee connect. The whole idea is, how do we connect? How do we get to know the individuals? And if you don't connect, if the computer isn't connected, it's not going to do you any good. If we aren't connected as human beings, and our companies depend on human connections, and there are so many different ways that we can do it. We found walk and talk is a very easy one. At the end of our 2 hours, we stood in a circle and we said, how was it? Everybody said this was the best part of the entire meeting. It wasn't really organized until right at the sort of halfway through the meeting, through the 3 days that we were there. Since then, we have incorporated walk and talk, or a version of that, in almost every team that we work with, every organization that we work with. And people have found it so easy, so simple, and yet so powerful. And some of the best things we do in life are the easy things to organize, to get people to talk to each other, communication, getting to know each other. So a critical, very easy tool to use. Ruby used another connection with your name, your role, your organization. How many years have you been here? Just getting to know people simply. We do it through pictures. Take a picture, draw a picture, share a story, storytelling, pictures, walking, talking. So easy to do. You can do it not only with your business team, but you can do it in your life. My wife and I do at the end of every day. We have a dinner like everybody else, but we take a minute to reflect and say what was the best of the day, or the catch of the day, and let's tell a little story. What was it and why was it so important? Very often it's the same incident, particularly during COVID. We were all experiencing a lot of the same things, but perhaps the meaning was different. And it took us through the whole meal. With kids, I've heard it reported by people with kids who say, rather than how was school today, which is a dead end conversation, it's okay, pass the potatoes, that's the rice. Instead of saying, what was something that happened and why was it impactful? Why was it exciting? Why was it important? What did you learn? Next one,
Bernie,
Ruby. Yes.
Bernie, just before we move to the next one, as you speak, I am reminded of a session we had with about 100 leaders, right, during the pandemic. And we asked a question. So we had them connected with each other. And after that, we asked them a question. So who among you connects with your people intentionally, deliberately, and regularly, consistently? And you know what, we were surprised that only 30% of the 100 leaders were doing that on a consistent basis. So that was one reason why we believe connecting, while it may seem and sound easy to do, because we do that on a regular basis naturally, we don't do that. It's not easy to do that within the workplace, because some of us don't do that at all. So that's why we realized, okay, the Gallup study says engagement is just about 25%. And that seems to be the same level. And connection is part of that.
And you can build that into your meeting. Have that a regular part. We do it in our meetings. Just take 5 minutes, sometimes 10. Sometimes we've had up to 50% of the meetings on connection questions. You can regulate it depending on the urgency and the time, but it's never enough to do one connection. It's constantly, we have to keep our computers or laptops plugged in if we want to use them. Get a question. A memorable event when you were 5 years old. You imagine the stories that could come up when you were 21, just that one question alone. Something new. There are hundreds of great check-in questions that you could use so your team continually checks and builds a bond, a connection of stories. Thank you,
Yes,
Ruby.
make you think that really connecting is about caring, and connecting is in multiple dimensions too. Right, Ernie?
Correct.
Okay.
Contract. Ruby talked a little bit about this in terms of norms. Team after team that we've been a part of have neglected to say, what are the rules of engagement for us? I'd like to tell you another story. It was in 2004, and I had been invited to work with the head of HR for one of the big pharma companies. And we were in London. And I had been asked by the team leader if I would work with his team and help them become a higher performing team. And I said, of course. But one of the things we do in advance is ask everybody on the team, what is one question I have that I think all of us should think about before the meeting and then perhaps discuss during the meeting. And so I asked for questions and I offered a question as well. And one of my questions was, what is so-and-so, the head of the team, doing well that he should consider continuing? What is something that he is doing that he should consider stopping or doing less, starting or doing more? So there were 3 parts, and we did the same with the team. When he got the feedback 2 days before the event, he was devastated. I met with him knowing, because I had seen the feedback as well, that he would be very ashamed, disappointed. And he told me 30 minutes before the meeting began, he said, Ernie, I don't know how to face my team. This is the worst professional hour of my life to see this and have to see my team. I feel like crying. I feel like leaving. What do I do? And I said, you know, and I know that feedback can sometimes be difficult, but it's a gift. Now you know. Before you didn't know. Now you know. And I said, here's something you consider. Tell them what you just told me. Because everybody knows that you have seen this and what you're thinking and feeling, and they're wondering, how is he going to take it? So I said, you've got 30 minutes to put your thoughts together. Why don't you go in the other room? And when people come and we get started, then you can come out and you're expected to give a toast. On starting up this meeting, we were in a wonderful mansion outside of London. And so he went in the other room, and 30 minutes later, everybody assembled, and they were all a little bit nervous because they knew that John, it's not his name, but they knew that he had seen the same report that they had contributed to. All of them had shared their voice. We did it. It was anonymous, but it wasn't confidential. So what everybody wrote, he saw, he read. So he came in and he basically told them what he told me. This is the toughest speech I've ever had to give. I don't know what to say. I feel like crying. I feel like leaving. But I want to thank you for the feedback because now, and I promise you, at the end of this meeting, this 3-day meeting, I'm going to be a different leader. It's going to take some work and I'm going to need your help. But together we can. That's about all he said. That's all he needed to say. He had his team working with him because he asked for help. And that 4-letter word is so seldom used, but when it is used, it can be very powerful. What we did, the last session of the 3-day meeting was a team leader contracting session where he got a chance to go in the room, a room on his own, quietly, took 2 flip charts. One was offers, the other was requests. And he wrote down, here's what I offer you so that we can be a better team. And here's what I need so that I can be my best. Here are my requests. At the same time, the team was doing the same thing. Here's what we offer you. Here's what we need from you if we're going to be the best that we can be. Then they came together. He began with his offer, followed by their requests, which became his commitment to them. Then it was their offer to him, followed by his requests, which became their commitment to him. They organized it, summarized it, put it into some kind of an instrument that they were able to give and check to see, are we living up to our commitments? Like in Ruby's case, the norms were put into an instrument where people could come back and check, are we living up to our norms? That contracting, that session with the feedback completely changed the team. The end of that 3-day session, on the evening, it was toasts. And John stood up before his team and he said, we're going to do something very special. I'm going to toast one of you. I can toast all of you. There's so many wonderful things that each of you have contributed to this team, but I'm going to toast to a certain person. And he gave his little introduction of that person, who in turn accepted his toast, said thank you. Others contributed, and then he toasted somebody until the last person ended up toasting him. The end of that meeting, one of the individuals said, have we been listening to what we have just said? This is a very different team than when we were 3 days ago. All of us contributed. It wasn't just one of us. It wasn't just you, John. You enabled us to speak up, to be heard. Contracting can happen in many different ways, but probably it's the most powerful part of this whole circle of disciplines that if you get better at and get better at it, you will really take a lot of the stress out of the organization. Next slide, please. Collecting. As an introvert, I can attest that this is a valuable way to get voices. Taking time, using the SRWR, really make a difference. The story I have is I was invited by the head of an international food company based in the United States. The head of the international division, an Indian, whom I had worked before, gave me a call. He said, Ernie, I need your help. Once again, the magic word. And I said, how can I help? He said, we're having a tough time as a team. And there are 2 guys on the team, and I don't know why I hired them. I'm thinking of firing them. Should I fire them before the meeting or after? And I said, why don't you fire them afterwards? I had a thought that maybe they shouldn't be fired. And that thought proved out. At the end of the meeting, we sat around a table and he says, I have to be transparent and honest with you. I told Ernie before the meeting that I was thinking of firing 2 of you. If anyone was to be fired, it should have been me, he said. I talk too much. I take too much of the time. We learned a little tool called Stop, Reflect, Write, Report that has brought in everybody on the team, particularly the introverts. And there are several introverts on this team. Your voice, now that we've heard it, is fabulous. We're going to continue to use this simple little tool to ensure that we collect everybody's thoughts. Everybody's voices must be heard. Simple story, powerful message. Have a process to engage everybody on the team. It's in my experience, this is the most diverse tool with the greatest possibility of diversity. If you can get everybody, gender, race, age, education, everybody's voice to be heard, it's amazing what can happen. No stopping people once they have been connected and heard. I'd like to go to the next one, which is collaborate. And the story here takes place in Sweden, another leadership development program with Volvo Truck. And this is the 5th session. They had 5 modules spread out over an 8-month period of 3 to 5 days per module, because people were coming from all over the world. And it wasn't just the chance to develop people. It was the chance to develop the business and to shift the culture. And at the second to the last day of the last module, 4 women, only 4 women in the program, it's a pretty male-dominated company, came up to me and said, Ernie, this has been a wonderful program, but, and I said, what's the but? And they said, we've talked about very important topics. We've learned a lot about leadership, but there's something that we as women know that the men don't. And that's there's a glass ceiling in our company. There's a glass ceiling in our industry. We didn't talk about it at all. But we want to tell you that if we had it to do over again, we would have come to you at the beginning of the meeting and say, could you talk about or help us work on the glass ceiling? And I said, look, the program's not over. We have tomorrow. We're going to do the glass ceiling tomorrow. They said, really? And I said, yeah, really. How are you going to do it? I don't have a clue. But I will have a clue by tomorrow. So overnight, I came up with our team's support on a strategy. We had the women sitting in a corner and the men sitting in another corner. Of course, the corner was big where the men were. We asked the 2 different groups, the women and the men, to write down one question that I think the men should tell us, or one question the women should tell us, and then select 4 of those questions. So the circle of 4 all had a question. The men had to do a little choosing of what questions they had. They had about an hour to have that conversation, come up with their question. Then the men came around the women, and in a fishbowl, the women were just sitting there. The men gave them a question one at a time, and the women were talking to themselves about the answer to the questions they received. The same thing happened with the men. They sat down, and the women stood behind them and gave them a question, and the men answered the question, talking to each other, ignored the women. We had a break. Then we came and we had a reflection and dialogue where the women and the men were sitting in one circle, interspersed, and the question is, what did I learn? What did I learn about the glass ceiling? What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about the men? What did I learn about the women? What did I learn about our company, about our industry? And the conversation was remarkable. People were listening, they were fully engaged, and it was stimulated by the 2 fish bowls prior to that. Stimulated because the women had the courage to stand up and say, it was good, but we want to hear what the buts are, what's missing. And it's never too late. Even if they had done it the day at the very end, we could have found a way to get them to speak up. What they did after lunch was remarkable as well. They went into open space, and everyone, the men and the women, were asked, what question do you want to talk about in a small group? And we found that there were about 5 or 6 small groups talking about different aspects of the glass ceiling. At the end of it, 2 men and 2 women were commissioned by all 24 to go to the leadership team and have a conversation about what they thought, the whole group, the leadership program, the 24 people, suggested that the leadership team of the company consider in terms of breaking the glass ceiling. And some good ideas came out of that and turned into actions. And it was because people spoke up. So we're in the speak up business, helping people find their voice, find a process where they can be heard. It was a simple process of them talking. We didn't have to do, as coaches, very much talking at all. We just had to come up with the process. And that's the same with us here. Last story, challenge. There is a constant opportunity for us to really challenge and to be able to learn from each other. At the end of every meeting, we have something called debrief. And this is a chance where people can talk about either plus or delta, or what can I do to improve this meeting going forward. And so what was happening is that a story I have to tell. I was working with the team, and they said, Ernie, we're having a business meeting, so we really don't need you present. And I said, I would like to be present, and I'll just sit and observe. I'd like to see if you're doing anything that you've learned, if you're applying any of the insights. So I sat there, and then the team leader turned to me and said, could you facilitate the debrief? And I said, sure. Take 2 minutes and write down what insights do you have about the meeting? What worked well? What could we do differently to make it a more effective meeting? And we went around the table and I went last. I didn't have too much to add. The wisdom in the room were able to send a message home. A lot of good things were happening, but they also had a few very important insights on what they could do differently. Debrief is a critical part of learning. When teams stop learning, they stop earning. Very simple. Businesses have gone out of business because they didn't do a debrief at the meetings. They didn't ask, well, how could we be better? What could we do? It's not what right and what went wrong. It's what went right and what could we do better next time. So changing it to a delta plus delta really enabled people to speak up in a way where it was easy to say, this is what I think we could do better next time. And since they were sharing the facilitation of the meetings, the next facilitator was able to learn and say, oh, I can do that, and did it. So with those stories and those tools, with debrief is a wonderful way to learn. And we are going to experience it in our meeting tonight, or this tonight, because usually it's night with the audience I'm talking to. But today, I think we will be able to collectively share a lot of good insights where we can learn with and from one another. Ruby, over to you to add if you have any other thoughts you may want to consider here. Well, Ruby's getting, that's all right. I just want you to look in between the arrows going across are indicators that they don't have to follow a sequence. But by looking at when do we need to challenge, when do we need to collect, collection can happen many times in a meeting, just like it's happening here with our breakout rooms. We're all doing the SRWR as a way to increase the voice, collecting ideas so we can better work on them. Today is not a working, collaborating meeting. In our minds it is, because hopefully you have a question in your mind, what can I learn from what I'm just hearing? The experience that Ernie and Ruby are sharing. What could I do? What should I do? What will I do? So there's a lot of gems here. You can see in the breadbasket here, work that can be done and should be done. And I hope that you will be able to do it. Ruby, over to you.
Yeah, if you look at the stars in the middle, Ernie, the experience is that we build stars of each member of the team, because they share the leadership, they own it. There's accountability, there's commitment, and there's health and happiness. And that's our experience in the LIM organization, of where we've been able to build and support teams and organizations.